think the happiest version of you has already existed. She just existed before everyone started telling you who you should become. I think one of the biggest lies that women are being sold right now is that self-love comes from becoming better. And I know I might be an outlier here, because if you spent any amount of time in the self-help world or the manifestation community, you've probably heard some version of this idea. Become your highest self. Act as if. Repeat these affirmations until you believe them. Create a new self-concept. On the surface, it sounds incredibly hopeful, because if you've spent years feeling insecure, anxious, not enough, or like you're somehow behind everyone else, the idea that you could simply imagine yourself into a different person feels comforting. It feels like there's finally an escape. But over the last few years, I've started noticing something that I can't unsee. Some of the women trying the hardest to become their highest self actually seem to dislike themselves the most. And I don't think that's an accident. I think it's built into the philosophy itself. Because if your entire goal is becoming someone else, an imagined ideal version of you, who doesn't have much in common with the current version of you, then what are you saying about the person you already are? You're saying she's the problem. You're saying she's the one you're trying to leave behind. And I don't think that's self-love at all. I think that's self-rejection wearing the clothes of self-improvement. I have a friend who has been in the manifestation community for years. She's always working on her self-concept, always repeating affirmations, always trying to imagine herself becoming this confident, magnetic, successful version of herself. But here's what I notice every time I talk to her. She constantly puts herself down. She criticizes herself. She doubts herself. She talks about herself as though she's fundamentally lacking something. And every time I hear it, I find myself asking the same question. If this work is supposed to teach you to love yourself, why does she seem to hate herself even more? Not openly, not dramatically, but quietly, subtly. It's almost like she's waiting for permission to love herself someday, when she finally becomes that future version. But that day never comes, because every day she wakes up as the person she's trying to escape. And I think that's where so many women get trapped. I call this the exile from self. It's when your entire identity becomes centered around escaping who you are today. And here's why it's so dangerous. If your goal is to become someone who has almost no relationship to who you naturally are, then every setback feels like proof that the real you has ruined everything. Every difficult day becomes, see, I'm still her. Every bad habit becomes, I'm slipping back. Every mistake becomes, the old me is back again. But what if the old you was never actually the enemy? What if she's simply been trying to get your attention this entire time? Because I don't think transformation happens by abandoning yourself. I think transformation happens by understanding yourself so deeply that you finally know what parts of you want to grow and what parts of you have been misunderstood all along. Those are two completely different journeys. One is built on rejection. The other is built on relationship. And here's where I think a lot of high-performance culture accidentally gets it wrong too. The message often sounds something like this. Here's the woman you should become. Here's how successful women think. Here's how high performers spend their mornings. Here's the perfect routine. Here's the perfect mindset. And again, I understand why it's appealing. Humans naturally look for models. We look around and think, she seems successful. Maybe I should become more like her. But what if her strengths aren't your strengths? What if the very thing that makes her extraordinary isn't what you're here to do? Somewhere along the way, we've confused inspiration with imitation. And those aren't the same thing. Because when inspiration becomes imitation, we slowly stop asking a much more important question. Who was I before everyone told me who I should become? That question changes everything, because I don't actually think your highest self is someone else. I think she's the most honest version of who you've been all along. If that's true, then trying to become someone completely different isn't self-love. It's identity escapism. And I think that's why so many women spend years working on themselves while feeling further and further away from who they really are. I think this goes much deeper than manifestation, because this isn't just about affirmation. This isn't just about self-concept. This is about our relationship with ourselves. Imagine you spend years trying to become somebody who feels completely different from who you naturally are. You change your routines. You change the way you dress, speak, the way you think. You tell yourself every day, I am her. I am becoming her. I already am that version of me. But eventually something happens. Life happens. You get tired. You miss a few habits. You stop keeping up the routine. You don't feel as confident anymore. And suddenly your mind says, I've become the old me again. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself why that feels so painful? I don't think it's because you failed. I think it's because your entire identity was built around escaping yourself. So when you naturally returned to yourself, it felt like failure. But maybe it wasn't failure at all. Maybe the real you wasn't trying to sabotage your progress. Maybe she was trying to tell you something. The real you isn't standing in the way of your life. The real you is waiting to be listened to. And the more you ignore her, the louder she has to become. I think this is actually why so many transformation methods feel so much like dieting. Think about it. A woman goes on an incredibly restrictive diet. She imagines this completely different version of herself. She believes, once I become that woman, then I'll finally be happy. She forces herself to eat in a way that doesn't feel sustainable. She white knuckles it for months. Maybe she even reaches her goal. But then eventually, she slips back into her old habits. And what happens? She doesn't question the diet. She questions herself. She says, I ruined everything. I have no discipline. I'm the problem. But what if the problem wasn't her? What if the problem was trying to force herself into a life that wasn't built around who she actually was? I think manifestation can accidentally become the exact same cycle. Instead of dieting your body, you're dieting your identity. You're trying to force yourself into becoming someone who exists mostly in your imagination. And every time you naturally fall back toward yourself, you assume that you failed. No, I think your real self is simply refusing to disappear. And honestly, I'm grateful she doesn't. She has something deeper to teach you. Here's another image that kept coming to me while I was thinking about this. Imagine a man who spends all of his time chasing another woman, buying her gifts, thinking about her, trying to build a future with her. Meanwhile, he has a wife at home. She's been there all along. She's asking for his attention. She's asking to be loved. She's asking him to invest in the life they could build together. But he keeps choosing someone else. Do you think that marriage is going to thrive? Of course not. Your authentic self is the wife. The fantasy version of yourself is the mistress. Every day you spend trying to become somebody completely disconnected from who you are, you're choosing the mistress. Meanwhile, the real you is sitting quietly inside saying, when are you going to come home? She's trying to bring you back to yourself. When I think about who we really are, I don't think about adulthood first. I think about childhood. If you go back to when you were a child, who were you? Most children don't wake up thinking, who should I become? They don't spend their day trying to optimize themselves. They don't spend hours imagining a different personality. They simply follow what naturally lights them up. They're curious, they're creative, they're drawn towards certain things for no logical reason at all. They build, they explore, they play, they obsess over things they love. And because they're connected to themselves, they experience success naturally, not because they're chasing success, but because they're fully engaged in what genuinely fascinates them. Somewhere along the way, many of us stopped listening to that inner pull. We started replacing it with expectations, and slowly our own inner voice became quieter than everyone else's. I don't think our purpose disappeared. I think it simply got buried underneath layer after layer of other people's opinions. And that's why I believe your highest self isn't somebody you invent. She's somebody you uncover. She comes from underneath all the projections. And when I say projections, I don't necessarily mean the psychological definition. A projection is any life you begin pursuing because somebody else convinced you it should matter. It can come from your parents, your family, your friends, your culture, your religion. social media, self-help. Sometimes the people who care about us the most unknowingly hand us dreams that were never ours to begin with. And if we're not careful, we spend years building a life that earns everyone's approval while slowly losing connection with ourselves. And this is why I think projections are so dangerous. They don't always look dramatic. Sometimes they're incredibly subtle. Sometimes they're simply little whispers that slowly become your identity. This is what successful women do. This is what good daughters do. This is what ambitious people want. This is what feminine women should care about. This is what happiness looks like. Until one day you wake up and you're living someone else's blueprint. Sometimes the consequences are small. You buy clothes you don't actually like. You decorate your home for Instagram instead of for yourself. You spend money on things that never truly make you happy. Those things can usually be changed, but sometimes the projections become much bigger. Think about the classic example of someone who becomes a doctor because their parents always wanted them to be a doctor, only to wake up one day realizing, I never actually chose this. That's heartbreaking because we're talking about decades of a person's life. So here's the exercise I want to leave you with. I call these the 5 gateways to authenticity. They're the 5 places where projections tend to hide. The first is your work or what you're studying. The second is where you're living. The third is the people you spend the most time with. Your partner, your closest friends, the people shaping your daily environment. The fourth is how you treat your body. Not just what you eat or how you exercise, but your relationship with your body. Are you caring for it or constantly trying to punish it into becoming someone else? And the fifth is your money. Where are you spending it? What are you investing in? What are you chasing? Because money tells the truth about what we believe matters. Now here's what I want you to do. Go through each one and don't answer with your mind first. When you imagine staying in that job for another 20 years, what happens inside you? When you imagine living where you currently live for another 20 years, what do you feel? When you think about your closest relationships, does your body soften or tighten? When you think about how you treat yourself, does it feel like care or control? When you think about where your money goes, does it reflect what genuinely matters to you? Because here's something I've learned. Your mind can generate a million logical reasons to stay on a path. It's incredibly good at justifying. It can explain anything, but your body is often telling the truth much sooner. The truth isn't 20 years from now. The truth is right now. You already know how you feel about the path you're walking. You feel it every single day. You just keep explaining it away. And I think that's where real transformation finally begins. Not when you become someone else. Not when you finally force yourself into the perfect routine. Not when you've mastered every affirmation. Because I don't believe your highest calling is hiding inside another woman's life. You can't find your highest calling by knocking on somebody else's door. So this week, before you make another goal, before you chase another version of yourself, before you ask, how do I become her? Pause. Ask yourself one question. Am I building a life that belongs to me? Or am I becoming really good at living inside someone else's projection? Because I think that question has the power to change everything. Please like and subscribe if this video was helpful for you. This channel is for women who want to strip away the projections, reconnect with themselves, and build a life that feels deeply, genuinely their own. I have so much more to share, and I can't wait to explore it with you.